McMahon doc. So,
Boy.
James, you've seen the first two episodes, right?
Yes, I just finished episode 2 maybe like 15, 20 minutes ago.
So good. The only thing you really need to watch from here is episode six, and then you can watch everything in the middle of that because everything in the middle is not necessarily the Vince McMahon documentary. It's like it transitions to like
The history of the company.
the history of
Right.
WWE, and then
Right.
there's like various topics, and it's like, what is this? Like, I brought a prop today. So you remember this
I knew it.
DVD? You remember this?
You
If
know
you've
what?
se- if you've seen this DVD, you have seen this Bill Simmons Netflix production. Almost 90% of it.
All right. So, Rich, when you said you brought a prop and you mentioned DVD, I was like, is it gonna be the McMahon versus Mr. McMahon DVD? And I was like, and then sure enough, I was like, I knew you were gonna do that. Okay. Yeah.
If you have seen
I have not seen that DVD before, so but as
everything's
far
on there. These
yeah.
where he's down to he wanted to do incest with Stephanie. It's all here. It's the same thing.
All right.
Um,
So all right. So for those that listen to our cross promotional podcast or inter promotional podcast on Thursday, um, was it Thursday or Friday?
Friday.
Friday. Okay. So uh, it was Friday because Thursday I would not have been able to do it because there was a hurricane about 100 miles away from me. So or 75, whatever. So on Friday, I mentioned different people at the gym that I go to, the boot camp gym I go to, and one of the people I have not mentioned yet is Katie. Katie is one of the newer trainers, and me and her have taken up a bond on the part where we used to do CrossFit. And for anyone that's ever been around someone that's done CrossFit before, aside from maybe Rich, if you've ever done CrossFit before, someone will quickly tell you they've done CrossFit before, right? So
Yeah.
me and her have struck a bond, and me and her talk about like some of the terrible things we've done to our body because we both were psychopaths and want to do that thing once upon a time. And I told her like, yeah, I'm into wrestling, whatever else. So I guess it's because of our friendship that we struck up over the months or whatever else. She during day off from the hurricane stuff watched the first 5 episodes of the Vince thing in one sitting, and she was like, "Oh my god, I had no idea." Like, and she started making all these connections about like, he's like Trump, and I was like, you know, him and Trump are like this, right? And for those of us from the podcast form, I have my two fingers twisted around each other because, and she was like, and I was like, yeah. And she was like, the megalomania and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, yes, absolutely. And then she told me all these things. It's like, yes, I live. Yes, she talked about how like her skin crawled when she heard and couldn't believe the Owen Hart story about how like they just continued to show after he died. And I said to her, it's not that's not even the worst part. Did they explain how he died? And she goes, no. Okay, do you know like those things like the metal hook things, whatever else? They're kind of like lashy or whatever else. And I pointed at an object that was similar. She's like, a carabiner? Yes, that's exactly what it's called. He was attached by a carabiner. He got sued for wrongful death. And then, like, I was like, look, you know I'm long-winded. We're talking right now. I give you another hour about how all awful things he's done that may or may not be in that thing that I have not seen, but I can go step by step through this of what you talked about and give you more layered detail on all this stuff. She mentioned the screw job, whatever else, and I didn't even get into the intricacies because there's no way they covered the intricacies of the screw job at the time to give you the context for why Brett made that decision.
There
Because
is.
so, and sure enough, I just mentioned to you off air before we started, they went through the typical point they always go through. Vince was back into the corner. He had no choice but to do it. Bullshit. Bret Hart had
Rights.
creative control,
Yeah.
and he was going to hand that belt back over. He was not going to show up to
And
WCW with the belt because they would have gotten sued. WCW,
and
no way.
they were spooked because they already had intellectual property lawsuit open with Scott Hall before that. So like they basically
Right,
give you no context to why Brett would like not want to drop the belt. He just
right,
looks like a crazy person, and then ultimately like he ends
and
up defending Vince in the long run anyway. It's
and
weird.
also and also in the context of today, anyone that knows anything about wrestling now, realize that even the people that are in wrestling now, this would never happen. The context is total, and the time frame is totally different from why it was happening then compared to now. Now, you have guys that don't want to do jobs, but they'll do the job and complain about it forever after the end of it now. Or they just won't show up or whatever else. But like it wouldn't go down that way. It just never would. But yeah, there were so many things. There were so many things to talk about. So like, let's get to, I guess, the One Nation Radio official version of it. Because like I've been ever since a non-wrestler got me, you know, we talked for like a half hour, 45 minutes about this damn thing. Is like, you know, someone that has no interest in wrestling other than, oh, my friend watches it, was watching it. So now I'm like, all right, I gotta watch this thing. And it was already gonna watch it for the show, but now I'm like, I had to watch it. So got 2 episodes in, and yeah, man, like if you're someone like us, or you're someone that comes across One Nation Radio, you're probably someone that already knows all this stuff. Now, that does not mean that it's not necessarily interesting or fun to go over it, but it's a lot like the Last Dance with Jordan, where it's like this is well-tread territory for someone that's already went out to find that stuff over the years. And but it is fun to see the way they cut they edited the stuff where it's like, boy, they can't wait to find motherfuckers and lies. It's like when they did when they had Meltzer on talk about like the mythology of WWE being such bullshit, and talked about like, here they go. They, you know, I bet they all talking about, you know, 93,000 and shit. And everybody goes 93,000. And then Hulk goes, he looks up in the air. He has number remembered. Yep. Look, Hulk Hogan, if he had the gumption, would have tattooed that Will Ospreay tattoo. He would have tattooed 93,100 whatever the fuck on his skin, but he didn't. He looked up there and counted that whole six digit number, and Hogan was like, and then Meltzer was like, yeah, 78,000. Get the fuck out of here. Yeah, oh, man. All that shit about Hogan, about Andre never being defeated. Yeah, he been defeated. Then show clips of him getting his ass thrown out of Rumbles. Then,
Hogan literally slamming him.
Yeah, been slammed like a bunch of. And the funny part is, at the beginning of the episode, the first episode, they show Hogan slamming Andre, and then they showed another one. They showed the one in Shea Stadium, and then they showed a different one. Yeah, it was like these fucking carnies, these lying ass niggas.
Like, it was a bunch of lying ass liars lying about a liar.
Bro,
like it was like the leader has been brought down, but this cult is still gonna go on because all these people still subscribe to this fantasy world.
Bro.
And they're protecting it with their life. It does They did not come to keep it a buck whatsoever.
Like bro, it's like Vince is Jesus, and like Hogan and Pritchard are disciples.
Keep going. Triple H. The Rock.
Triple H, The Rock, Hogan, Austin haven't gotten to that part yet. Haven't gotten to that part yet.
Yeah. Because it's only first Cena episodes. Offers nothing. Cody Rhodes looks like a young Mark in this thing.
Bro. They did a cut up on Cody at the beginning of the first episode and said that Andre was the first attraction in pro wrestling. I'm sorry. I thought your dad and a bunch of his other predecessors being NWA World Heavyweight Champion were the national draw across the whole fucking country, across all the territories, by saying, hey, we are on a partnership. We have all made the committee meeting and decided that Lou Thesz is going to be the fucking champion, and he's going to take his ass from St. Louis to wherever the fuck, whether it's Georgia or Florida or California or St. Louis or Amarillo or whatever else, and he's going to face your local champion, and you're going to draw your biggest house of the month. I'm sorry. I thought that's how that went. I thought your dad told you about the wrestling business. Asshole. That made me so, bro. It made me irrationally mad to see Cody that early in line like that. I was like, your dad's Dusty Rhodes.
This shit was niggas talk about the freako. This is a lie off that these niggas was doing. This is a lie off.
Like, I couldn't believe it, bro. I could not believe it.
There's another part when I don't know if you got to this part where they were talking about, yeah, Vince, so you bought out the territories and all that, and you purchased every top star, essentially brought them to you.
Business.
What was the difference between like what you were doing and what Eric Bischoff was doing? He's like, oh, it's totally different.
That was personal. Yes. Katie mentioned that to me exactly. He was like, they told me the story about how they bought up all these wrestlers from the territory, and I explained like how he did it with like, getting their tapes after he got that time slot and showing all the wrestlers and help promote them to then steal them to help the poaching, because they didn't show that part. They didn't talk about that part. But I mentioned that to her. She was like, oh my God, because when WCW takes Hogan, he's talking about how it's so unfair. And it's like, I explained to her, this is a totally different landscape. The 80s, this is the 80s, right? So Vince has the territory that owns that in his footprint has Boston, New York, I'm sorry, DC, Philly, in Baltimore. And Baltimore in the 80s was one of the biggest cities in the country still. He has that as his geographic blueprint. He has the advantage of the population. And he also has in his backyard the media market of the world. He has the inherent advantage that no other promoter has, and he inherited from his dad. Like,
oh, they talked about that shit too.
I mentioned the junior stuff to her too, and I mentioned so he has all of that stuff working for him. So then by the time he has the money advantage, so he can he can poach all these people away. So when he says all this stuff about Ted Turner, it's bullshit because he did the same thing to get everybody else out the business when he went national. Yeah. And she was like, "Oh yeah, that does." She understood it immediately. As someone that doesn't watch this, someone that just give her the added context of how unfair advantage he had. Like him crying about Ted Turner's billion dollar Ted is like, you're a multi-millionaire compared to these people that are struggling to get $1 million, right? Like Crockett. How fluid was the $1 million he had?
Yeah, man.
Right? Like when he had the jet, right? Does he have to sell the jet to have the $1 million on hand to get the cash? You know what I'm saying? Get the hell out of here.
Them boys in the red like Pyru.
Yeah.
But there was a whole part where Vince essentially admits that he's not self-made from this shit, and then they were using the profits from the company to pay for the company, and so it's like
Linda said robbing Peter to pay Paul. Yep.
Yeah, so like
which we knew, but
this is like
on Twitter. No, Tony Khan, his dad's an NFL owner. Oh no.
Yeah, so I would like more people to come to the light on that.
Your father's a nepo baby. Yes.
There is just so many absolute lies and then just bizarre things. Like, and the way it's kind of glossed over because, all right, this is a difficult task, right? This was damn near a suicide mission for Bill Simmons and Netflix. If they were expecting some kind of honesty at all, David Shoemaker was on this thing. This was an impossible task to try to like bring people to the carpet that are designed to lie to you. Like,
right. Yep.
And then like between everyone that I saw in there,
they've lied so much that they think it's the truth now.
Only Dave Meltzer and Tony Atlas came out of this thing looking remotely like charming, credible, or anything like that.
Well, I mean, I would also throw in like the pieces from Costas and also Mushnick.
Oh, yeah. He's a scumbag. Phil Mushnick, yeah.
Yeah. I throw them in there, but that's the same thing. It's like it's funny that like we have the credible journalists, right? New York Post, NBC, and and then you have like, the one that's actually that's actual like ring in life is actually pro wrestling. Dave Meltzer is like, so most the only person. Like, obviously, we know that Simmons has been a subscriber to the Observer for years, on and off or whatever, or on the whole time, whatever. But it's like, okay, so for the people that for decades have been so mad at his match ratings, therefore his reporting has to be bullshit and everything or whatever else. He's not a real journalist, and he's out here for to kill WWE. He's on the dock for WWE that brought everybody in that would approve or yay or nay to everybody. Interesting. Interesting how that works.
Right.
Are we going to continue to pretend that like Dave Meltzer like lied about Roman Reigns having leukemia when he never said such a thing? Are we still doing that?
Like he doesn't love WWE's draws. Like come on, man. Like
he doesn't get on. He doesn't sit down on both knees. He doesn't rest on both knees to suck WWE's dick. So therefore, he's a So therefore,
there's like Triple H in this thing is funny too because it's almost like
I can't wait to get to that.
He's trying to not say too much or whatever, and every time he pops in,
can't risk an indictment.
Every time he pops in, it's like this phrase where it's like he tries to like drop something like profound on you, but it don't quite like. It's like, hold on, what? Like, I don't.
Is it a lie or is it not profound at all?
It's not profound, and it's something like.
So he's Emmanuel Aicho.
That just sounds like it's been repeated in wrestling for decades and shit. Like,
hey. My joke was funny. Fuck you. So he's like Emmanuel Aicho. Emmanuel Aicho be doing that.
I'm gonna say I don't really check for his stuff too much.
Brother,
so.
he be on them shows and he be out here talking, like he's pontificating to you, like he's deep in thought, and it's like, bro, this ain't hit no nothing. This ain't hit no nothing, and in fact, it's nonsense.
Like there was one part, like they basically do like all the documentaries in one. Like they go through the Attitude Era. They're talking about ruthless aggression, a bunch of shit we don't care about. So like the filming schedule of this thing fucked this thing royally, I think, because a lot of this stuff was getting filmed in 2021, 2022, and of course, like as these different lawsuits drop and then the resignations and official resignations, like the juice, like, or the gas comes off this thing, like after the second one all the way until episode 6 seemingly.
Makes sense.
And then like the last 30 minutes is like, okay, this is like the new stuff, and it's like, but they essentially end the ride just as it's getting going. Bruce Pritchard looks like an absolute fucking liar and a disgrace in episode 6, where they're like, yeah, man, what did you think of the show? Because you saw some early screenings of it, and this is 2 years after he was interviewed before. He was like, I thought it sucked. He was like, it left out the human part of Vince McMahon. He tells this story about like how Vince helped his wife when she got diagnosed with cancer, and it's 24 years later and all this stuff, and he's a human and all this shit. And then what happened? They were like 2 days later, and then it was like the big story that broke earlier this year, like about him, with Janelle Grant, essentially the full lawsuit dropping. It was like, oh, you're going up for this guy. Oh.
But I mean, he was already doing it because, like, okay, so as you mentioned, gas taking off after episode 2, but in episode 2 on the Rita Marie referee Rita Chatterton, like there was statute of limitation lifted, and then like all of a sudden, like Vince settles for multiple millions of dollars.
Right.
That's how they ended it.
Right.
So it's like. Yeah,
then they talk about Bruce. They talk about the Ring Boy scandal and all that.
Yep,
like,
they did.
So like they would go really hard on people that had, like, say, like people that couldn't hurt them anymore. So like you can bury the fuck out of Mel Phillips. You can bury the fuck out of certain people, but other people, like, it's like they don't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, like Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart goes like, there's some stuff that we can talk about, and he's like, what do you want to talk about? He's like, well, I don't. He's talking about like relationships, or whatever, and things that happen backstage. He's like, well, I don't know what I can say. He looked like
he ain't been given the script.
Right. I was like, oh boy. And it was like, how do you let this get out on camera?
Look, there was a certain point where Paul Heyman is in the background of Vince getting interviewed. Vince has been getting interviewed so long, he's like losing track. So like they're repeating to him like storyline, like in the back. So they were like trying to tell him like he's got a bunch of handlers. Like I couldn't imagine sitting with Vince McMahon and expecting him to like tell you these things and remember these things accurately. And it's like they don't know exactly what they can say because Vince doesn't know what he wants to say.
And also because of this, because of what happened at the end of or last year or whatever, or 2002, like they had to stop this. So they're left with, trying to, the main character leaves. Now they have to like try to retrofit a narrative to self to continue off this piece of this documentary, right? So like they were stuck because he don't want to answer no questions because he, that's evidence.
Yeah. At one point, they're talking about Benoit. They're talking about the Undertaker. Oh, so the Undertaker looked like a fucking mark, by the way.
I heard him talk about Vince was back into the corner doing the screw job thing. Was like, God damn it, again.
Yeah, he bought that whole thing, but like I'm talking about like WrestleMania 30. So Vince McMahon is he's saying, we all know WrestleMania 30, one of the hardest matches in Undertaker's life. He collapses as soon as he goes back through the joint. He's concussed. or whatever.
Yeah, concussed and wrestled in like 20 minutes after concussion.
Vince McMahon goes on this DVD and says, I don't think he was concussed. He was just in shock that he was going to lose to Lesnar. I'm like, how can the Undertaker watch his back? So Undertaker is loyal to this man beyond when you're the Undertaker, you watch his back. Do you finally realize this man don't actually give a fuck about you after you've been trying to be a lieutenant for fucking decades for him? Like, did it finally click, Undertaker? Like, stand the fuck up, Jesus.
Wrestling court. Anyway, so
the biggest mark of them all.
So there's also the one where it's like Vince and Hogan, they both
want credit for it still.
Well, yeah, they both jockeying for credit on it. I will say this though. I think at this point in the game, they both made it where like this was the star, this was the mind behind the star. They have at least settled on that part, at least at this stage of it. Now, the part that was funny for me, you mentioned Marks. Man, Marks and Liars, Hogan and Vince, they was doing their thing. They was out there looking like Miami Heat, Wade and LeBron when they was out there talking about, hey, we didn't know if Andre was gonna let it happen. He didn't know. I was like, if you don't get the fuck out.
That was an old reliable. Like Hogan was out here dipping in. Like, yeah, this is Stockton Malone. This is pick and roll right here. We done did this 1,000 times. Like Hogan was out here. I'm just shocked that he just he didn't add Andre was about to die and all this other shit. Hogan has added different twists in it over the years.
He said in the same interview, I would assume, because he's wearing the same shirt. I hope he ain't rock kicking it like that at this point or whatever. But he said at some point, Vince went to Andre to bring him back and told him to go get the surgery because him and Hogan are going to sell out for the 93,000 lion ass. And then he says that he had the surgery and he didn't realize that Andre was in such a bad shape. So he basically told him for most of the match, when you bump or go to the ground, go by the ropes, you use the ropes to help get yourself up. But Vince says that he was the one, he didn't know whether or not that Andre was going to let him decide to finish. How was he going to get up after you body slammed him? If he was in such a bad shape, he need the ropes to get up. How does that make sense, Hulk Hogan?
They could have just screwed him, right?
No, but you're going to say, if this nigga need the ropes to get up, how's he going to kick out? What is there to kick with?
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh, God.
This man, they go through the entire Benoit section. They talk about how Vince was going to kill himself on screen and go middle-aged and crazy and stuff like that. But how they had to throw it out. We'll get to the Owen Hart after this.
Okay.
Stone Cold just gets on camera and he's like, I don't believe in CTE. He's like, I've been concussed once while wrestling. And then he basically dresses it up like, yeah, like if you get a concussion while you're wrestling, you're doing it wrong or whatever.
Rich.
And I was like, what? I was like, bro, this is a step from COVID isn't real. Like this is the same family, essentially.
Right. Which is why I've been laughing at that. I'm not a CTE guy the whole time ever since then because go ahead.
So I think they did this because this is a mandated company talking point that concussions and head injuries and all this stuff has been drilled into them that we do not get these or whatever. We do not acknowledge these. They don't report these when they happen to people.
Right.
So
they're just off TV for no explanation.
So and
then they go on Twitter and say that they're fine, even though everyone knows they're having concussions, like Alexa Bliss was a couple years ago. Yeah.
So when Austin says he doesn't believe in CTE, I believe him, and I think it's a part of the WWE mythos of yeah, man, they don't want to be responsible for more lawsuits. They don't want. It's all like a team effort.
You know what it is?
On here.
You know what it is? This is the 2010s version of their 92 steroid stuff. Like they're kicking in the door, so we're going to put out a drug policy, and then we're gonna watch all these motherfuckers still look jacked to the gills, right? And then it's just some side people that we're not gonna report it. The same way they said they're gonna be drug free. It's like, bro, we've known about this weed tax for years when they failed drug tests.
Yeah.
Also,
Cody Rhodes, I came into a drug free WWE. Get the fuck out of
here. Also, now he says that his only concussion was the power drive from Owen Hart. Rich, what is the highest grossing buy rate for a SummerSlam ever?
I would think it's him and Austin, or him and Undertaker in 1998, I would believe.
Yeah, Highway to Hell. Rich, what famously happened early in that match?
So Austin like bent over or whatever to take like a back body drop or something. And
he's going to give Undertaker a back body drop, and then Undertaker kicked him in the gut, and then which caused Austin to raise his head up. And then what happened between those two?
He knocked his knee or his foot with his head and knocked Austin the fuck out, loopy.
Right, and Austin was staggered and fucked up the whole rest of the match, which led to it not being a good match, and ultimately a match where like Undertaker had to carry him around the rest of the match, including like putting him on the table at MSG, and then having to jump off the top turnbuckle with a super leg drop to the table, because in MSG the announcing tables were really, really close.
Right.
Because he's not fucking loopy because they knocked heads. That's a concussion, nigga. What are you talking about?
So like, when he says he doesn't believe in CTE, they literally cut to Chris Nowinski and they're like, "Yeah, we tested Benoit's brain. He had CTE." Like, it's like this is not a debate. Like,
right, like it was, and not only that, it was like, from what I remember, like
this is not a religion.
Up to that point, he was like one of the worst cases they had ever seen.
Right. Like, this is not a religion. Like, this is not something you believe in. Whether it's, I don't know. Like,
yes, yeah, it's not like the meaning life. Like, how do we all get here? Does our sentience have, in our conscience have meaning? No, nigga. Like, does he have calcium deposits in his brain or not? Yes or no? Like, it's really fucking simple. Are there calcium deposits are there mineral deposits in his brain that are caused by repeated trauma? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Or multiple instances of trauma, to be more specific.
So Curry
yes or no?
said,
real simple.
Wait, I thought Austin was not loopy in the Buried Alive match, not the SummerSlam match. So that's actually a good thing you bring that up. I remember Undertaker hitting him with that fucking shovel. that's probably where that happened.
But obviously we know pro wrestling motherfuckers get concussed, and they don't even know they're concussed, right? They just shake it off, right? Yeah. And a lot of people just think there's difference between, being blacked out and having your bell rung. No, your bell rung is probably a concussion too. So we're not getting to that. My joke was the highest selling the biggest buy they ever had for a SummerSlam was him in the main event getting fucking loopy. What's he talking about? It's a notably famous match. He probably was doing the hottest part of the company.
He probably doesn't remember, James.
God damn it. That's a good point. He probably does not remember. I forgot about that. You don't remember the concussions you got. That sounds like the joke that's been going around on Twitter lately of like no. Like the joke, the meme that's going on. We're like, hey, once I do this verbal sound or whatever else, right? Like once I clap my hands, Rich, you'll never remember that you were gay.
Yes.
Right? That joke, like, bro, once I hit you with this fucking shovel, or we knock fucking heads, you will not remember that you were concussed. The same way that Mick Foley does not remember parts of Hell in a Cell. With Undertaker.
Yeah. Undertaker was saying he does not remember WrestleMania 30. He does not remember.
Oh, he said that?
He literally said it on the shit.
What a shocker. Maybe someone should pull it up on, I can't say the network. Someone should pull it up on Peacock for him.
Yeah. It's like, and just this entire production was just like, for me, it was unserious, and it was like
Owen. You were going to talk about Owen.
The Owen thing where Vince McMahon is basically talking about, yeah, man, it happened in the dark. The fans had no idea in the building, and if I died, I want the show to go on. And then Brett,
who said this?
Vince. Like, this man Blood's still on the mat or whatever, so they don't make the announcement in the building. they're showing the wrestlers like crying, cutting promos that don't make sense. They have Jim Ross announce it on TV,
Right.
but they don't say it to the crowd. So like, Bret Hart jumps in and he's like, "Yeah, man. I bet if it was Shane, they wouldn't have fucking they wouldn't have kept the show going or whatever." And a lot of the stuff like they talk about Bret like eventually like forgiving them for Owen, and it was just like this weird kind of moment because like he talked to someone from the Kansas City police who assured him it was an accident and all that, but I was like, no, like
it was an accident, but it was an accident due to gross negligence.
Yeah. So
like there's no like murderer. There was no murderer walking around in '99 WWE like a who done it, like walking around the production team. It was gross negligence killed Owen Hart.
Right, and I don't like that. Obviously, was not communicated.
Blatant disregard for safety is why Owen Hart is not still alive.
Yeah, and there's even more of this stuff. Like it's all like a whirlwind kind of because that's how like this thing is like given to you. And a lot of people are doing like a lot of good like detailed breakdowns, and I'm just kind of going off memory of like what this thing was, and it just paints a picture of a guy that was in a fantasy world that he created for 40 years, who didn't even really know if it was. He didn't even know who his true self was, and the love he didn't get from his father, he passed it down to his son. Where Shane just is like, I did all this stuff, and he finally gave me a hug after WrestleMania 32, essentially. And it was like it was sad in a way, and I'm assuming
that it like also like it's supposed to be the parallel to the story Vince gave at the beginning about like how his dad said he was proud of him like the day before he died.
Yeah,
which is also fucking ridiculous.
Yeah,
ridiculous in that it's sad. Like Vince's whole lifehood was sad. Like the whole situation, like he's with his mom and his dad and his stepdad's beating the shit out of him, and like his dad not in life, and then all of a sudden like his dad comes and gets him in his teens or 12 years old or whatever it was. Yeah, it's all fucked up.
So like, it's a they basically talk about like how Stephanie was kind of one that emerged essentially as the one. They talk about how she became a television performer and the whole thing with Triple H, and there's just a lot of like they have Trish on there. Trish looks awful in this thing. She basically defends the dog barking segment because it was like, it was a work, it was entertainment, like, and it was like, thanks Trish.
Trish. The thing, okay, so the thing I was saying to Katie when we were talking about is like, how like when Me Too was happening and you had like all these directors and like film producers or whatever else, you look at like the history of the stuff they produce or create as far as their media, the media for us to consume, and you see all these kind of like weird things, whatever. So you see like the things that like in real life they were accused of doing or whatever else, and how it mirrors what was the stuff they actually were directing or producing as their art. Shit. It was like that's what Vince was doing. Like Vince was like all the sex trafficking stuff, whatever else. He was doing that with the sexual harassment lawsuit with Sable, doing all this stuff with having the affairs in front of a comatose or a catatonic Linda McMahon, all that kind of stuff. Like this shit, and in retrospect, like people knew all this kind of stuff with like the Ring Boys scandal, all this other stuff. But like when it came to the sex trafficking stuff or whatever else, the sexual harassment stuff, and all these lawsuits, whatever else, this was like the thing was like you look back and you're like, nah, man, this was you thought you got away with this shit, so you thought like this is what people like at their basis, like visceral level of thinking or whatever else. Like that's their initial reaction. Like at their most basis level, everything is about sex. Whether it's inappropriate or not, it's about sex. And it's like you put this out on TV, and now we look back and it's like, oh, I see how a fucked up mind. A fucked up, coked up mind comes up with this kind of stuff for TV that people like. Yeah.
They bring up the Ashley Massaro stuff, how they essentially covered that rape up that took place. They said some shit like she never reported it, and so they didn't do anything about it. They basically talk about she ended up committing suicide, and it was like. Just like there are tons and tons of stories. And
did you ever talk about Lawler?
Never. They didn't talk about Laurel at all.
That's another scandal.
Yeah. But yeah, like there's a lot of stuff that gets like left out and just slightly changed, and then it's like missing context from, you know, what the actual true story would be. And the people that are seeing this, like Brazil wrote me about this and saying she watched it and this whole thing is crazy, whatever. She couldn't believe Brett punched Vince or whatever. And like my sister was born in 2001, so like she doesn't know anything about like the 90s and shit like that. In wrestling, at least, she used to watch like kind of like towards the end of that decade, but
yeah.
It was like I was trying to like quickly explain to her there's way more to it. I did watch it. It's not kind of what you think it is, but like
it's worse.
It's worse. Like
yep.
And you know,
like this is like we got to fit all of the scandals into like a nice 6 hour window.
Right. Like they can keep going or whatever. If this thing was like Dave Meltzer making this thing, like it would be a lot different.
Right.
If this thing was, you know, if more people were getting interviewed that perhaps were not still on the WWE payroll, you might have gotten a different.
Yeah, you would have got somebody on. You would have got another wrestler that was 100% honest besides Tony Atlas.
Yeah, who said, you know, Pat Patterson was grabbing on him.
Yep.
And everyone kind of just like shrugs it off in the documentary, and they're like, I don't know about that. Like, and it's like, hold on, what? Like, why did we just move past this?
And then like Bruce Prichard goes on and be like, you know, the Ring Boy scandal, like, you know, I don't believe, you know, the other two, yeah, they did that shit, but I don't believe Pat Patterson was involved in it or whatever else. And then it's just like, what the fuck?
The people that they would like, if Pat Patterson was still alive, he would be being protected in the same way, so they were protecting him in death.
Yep.
And you know, a lot of it is like, yep, we are this group of people between Cena, Rock, Austin, and The Rock's barely in this thing. I want to know what happened there. The Rock pops up briefly when he's talking about like the Nation of Domination and like Rocky Maivia and getting established during the Attitude Era, and I feel like I don't see The Rock really again. So like, is there
any way? I mean, I don't know because I only see The Rock one time in the 2 episodes. Like, is there any chance like Rock? I mean, you have to look at his attire or whatever else and see what he looks like at the time. But like, does this look like a thing where like Rock does not do this until after he signs, like to become to get the money?
No idea.
Okay. Because I'm thinking like maybe he's like, I'm not doing this shit because I'm still in Hollywood. I'm not trying to get my ass, you know, fucked up with them. And then all of a sudden, you know, he comes in and gets that $30 million. He's like, all right, I'll sit down for one interview.
I mean, Cena's all over this shit. So like, I don't know, but you know, Cena's whole.
But Cena has put his neck out there for Vince went away ever since all this shit has hit the fan in the last 2 years in ways that Rock has never. You know, he's still like Rock. Look, I ain't heard Dwayne The Rock Johnson call Vince McMahon a friend in the last 2 years, like I've heard him say about with Cena. The way Cena's done it. Have you? I don't recall.
I don't know. Like
Rock was like absolutely fuck not. That shit over there. I ain't with them.
A backdoor deal was made. Essentially, like, hey man, it's shit that we don't know about, but. It's like, yeah, man, like, you come in here and step in for me while we transition Vince out of here. But this thing was the piece of media to separate Vince McMahon from WWE. And it's like they're trying to give repeated example after repeated example to show.
You're right. I think once the shit hits the fan in 2022, I think this documentary changed.
Oh, absolutely.
So, like, I think, you know, like maybe they were always navigating for a deal for them to move one of them, Raw or SmackDown, to Netflix. This was the gateway for it. Like, but I think it was almost supposed to be like, we're going to cover, you know, the most interesting man in the history of pro wrestling, right? Or the most important man in the history of pro wrestling, as a gateway to get people interested in WWE now being on Netflix. And now that they're still going to Netflix, is like, bad man gone. Like, we're still going to do that. We put all this money into this fucking thing. We're going to bury him and separate, and put a, huge line in the sand. From WrestleMania 40 on, it is Triple H and Dwayne The Rock Johnson and the people that are carrying this thing forward that this bad man has been removed from. We're moving on. Is that like it's
when they talk
it's
about
Bill O'Brien's Penn State post Paterno.
Yeah, like there's like they talk about Stephanie was joining the company stepped up to take over for Vince after leading the thank you chants. How she resigned, and I just reread that statement again because they put it in there when she's like, "I'm gonna basically resume my leave and I'm gonna one up it with my official resignation," and it's just like, I'm like, well. So who dropped the dime on Vince? Can we start asking this question out loud right now? I sent a tweet out about it.
I still got my. You know who I still think did it?
I think Stephanie did it.
Rich. You know what's funny?
I think Stephanie did it.
Rich.
She was like, I will not be involved with him or whatever.
Rich.
And then it there's
no continue. I'm just saying. I'm ad-libbing. Sorry.
She's number one on the list, right? There could be others, right? Like Nick Khan, Triple H. These people benefit from this stuff, right? Does The Rock have knowledge of this? Possibly. He's in on it too, right? But I think the person that was like, it's over for this motherfucker, I'm pushing the button, I think it was Stephanie.
Okay, so when he first got thrown out, right? When the news dropped from the Wall Street story, right? And he sent out that tweet, and we did the Emergency podcast on that Friday. And I know it's a Friday because I went through and I watched our clips from that day. We did 3 clips. I did a rare thing. I put up the tinfoil hat from 1H Radio, and I said I had a conspiracy about of saying like, hey, Triple H was the person that was set to be a succession plan in 2019. He was already putting out like those 24 documentaries, saying, pointing how like he was the guy to succeed Vince. Stephanie was always there. Stephanie's getting awards for her work, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, the pandemic happens, and all of a sudden, Triple H has a heart episode. He gets set up to be the guy that has to go head to head with his developmental inside the fucking LA Fitness against AEW Dynamite, and he gets his ass kicked, and then all of a sudden he's a loser, and then he has a heart episode, and then he's off just basically doing still official with the company, but we don't know what the fuck he's doing. And then next thing you know, Stephanie leaves, and then 2 weeks later after she leaves, the story leaks about how she wasn't really good at her job after she was winning awards for being good at her job. And then a week later, New York Times drops about all this sexual impropriety that was happening in the workplace via Vince McMahon and paying off or signing women to NDAs, and him paying off these NDAs so they don't tell on his misconduct. Now, I said, hey, what is most likely to have happened? Was it that the succession plan said we're tired of waiting, or Vince said you're not succession plan, and they said fuck that, we are. I said this 2 years ago. It was 2 summers ago, Rich.
Yeah. This is
I
crazy.
was 100 pounds heavier then. I'm drinking today, but at that point I was drinking a whole 1.5 a 1.5 liter bottle of sparkling wine. Now I'm drinking twisted tea.
Yeah.
I just spilled this shit. Yo. But anyway, my point is my point, right? When it's time to trash this man, this is by happenstance. When it's time to trash this man, I'm gonna get drunk. It's gonna happen. But anyway, the real thing is this, man. Like, that was the most likely scenario. Somebody had to know where these bodies were buried, and somebody had to have a reason to do it. And the three most likely suspects were Paul Triple H Levesque, Stephanie McMahon, and Nick Khan. So when you hear about corporate CEO 3 being Stephanie McMahon, it's like, oh, no fucking shit.
Yeah, and think about this. Like, she leaves the company, so she's not associated with the company anymore for this lawsuit or whatever, right? And, all right, just from a patriarchal standpoint, I'll say it like that. So Stephanie kept her job all those years because I would assume she thought she was getting the company handed to her, right? And
Right.
with Triple H.
Right.
Well, if you quote unquote got the company, both of y'all don't necessarily need to be there. Somebody can stay home with the kids. It could have been Paul, but it's gonna be her or whatever. While Triple H gets to do the thing that he always wanted to do, there's no need for Stephanie McMahon to still be there. Unless she just loved being in the boardroom and everything like that. But no, why do that? You can, and she cashed out too.
Right. And also I think the oldest is now in college, right?
Not sure.
Okay.
But yeah.
But they're getting close to that age if they're not already there.
Yeah, for me it adds up. Okay. They made a deep alliance that we will never hear about. Because this story, whatever the fuck it is dying with these people. Unless somebody is like, you know what? I know what happened. And they give it to Meltzer, or they write a book, or something.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fall of Vince McMahon, like, ironically, you don't really, like you see what happened in the front of the thing, but he still came back after all this, right?
Right.
So
and he came back because remember Meltzer was talking about that for months before it even happened. Like Vince feels like he made a bad decision by doing it, and he wants to come back. And then he made the whole play where like, I'm installing new board members. They're going to vote in my favor to bring me back on, and then I'm going to throw out people that helped oust me, and then I'm going to sell the company. And we thought at first it's like, oh no, he's saying he's going to sell the company. He's not really going to sell the company because he just wants his chair back. And then ultimately he did sell the company. And then, more, and then, I think that was a play. He actually was going to try to get himself that chair again. And then I think the same people that got his ass thrown out, they made him retire.
Right, we gonna finish him.
We're going to drop some more shit on you. And then the people that just bought the company would be like, oh, no, you're no longer head of creative. No, brother.
You're not on the board.
We're going to invent a fucking executive office or executive position for Triple H to call himself the Booker. We're gonna call him the creative of. The chief creative officer. Chief what officer? The chief content officer, right?
Yeah, chief content officer or something like that. Yeah,
whatever. What an elaborate way to say showrunner.
Yeah, man. Fuck them. At the end of the day, that's kind of what this comes down to. It's like, this is bullshit. This whole thing is bullshit. If you watch this thing, you know what's in the like episodes 3, 4, and 5, essentially. And they dressed it up in pretty modern documentary, fashion. The dim lighting, the super high grain film, the very nice interviews, like the high def cameras. Like it's a really it's put together beautifully. Did they talk about the massage parlor thing in the mid 2000s? Yes, and then they talked about how like there was a Mickey James storyline that
Piggy James?
No, like a different one, like where she was like basically false accusing a guy of like touching her and stuff like, and they literally play the whole clip or whatever. Jeez. And it's like more of that shit, like, oh, this shit that was going on in your life, you just putting on the screen just as a ha-ha.
Yep. And like the thing about it is like another framing that I don't know if this paralleled on purpose, but like it's there is like how he made Hulkamania off of, the way they're talking about it is like the way that it's so funny because the way that like wrestling fans that don't like hearing about the backstage, like they don't like hearing about how the strings are pulled, to the machinations of making these stories work or whatever else, is like they don't like that. Like, hey, they're moving this person out the way to lose somebody, so they have a transitional champion, a heel, a bad guy, to then make the next guy a hero of the champion without having to interact with the guy that actually people really loved, like Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns. Mm-hmm. And then you go back, and you hear about like, all right, I'm going national. I got the company from my dad after selling him his own money, basically. We gotta get Bob Backlund the fuck out of here. We need to get Backlund the fuck out of here, but we can't have Backlund go against Hulk Hogan. So we'll have the Iranian dude, wrestle and beat Backlund, and then Backlund Sheik will then quickly lose to Hogan, right? And then they also talked about it with putting it after they did WrestleMania 6, how they had Slaughter take the belt off of Warrior and then like put to get it back to Hogan, right? So the way they talk about it, like that's interesting, or is like that's the same way that we talk about when you're someone that's watched a lot of wrestling. You know that this is all narrative. This is all done via narrative, right? This is some people are making decisions. You're aware there's a TV show where people make decisions on how these things go. Meanwhile, we gotta go online and be like, just enjoy the show.
Yeah.
These are the people that create the show. Talk about it. So yeah, man, like it was I forgot my point ultimately was for that, but like oh, I know my point was like to talk about how like the blatant ways of moving this stuff around, and then like meaning like they have all this control on all this kind of stuff, and then like you talked about the Mickey James thing. It's like all of that stuff, all this stuff is intentional.
There's a lot more.
At least, let me phrase it. If it's not intentional, it's happening at a subconscious level. I'm sorry, I'm probably slurring, but you get my point.
Yeah, it's something to study. I think it's when you look at like, do not watch this thing at face value. Like if I can offer
liars.
anything, you cannot consume this as face value. Because
they're all liars, and whoever is like crafting all this stuff for all the footage, creating a narrative of the show, it's obvious that the person that put this together is not trying to be 100% truthful. They're trying to be like, I don't know, what you say, 75, 80% truthful?
Yeah, like they're trying to be like, all right, there's enough plausible deniability to be like, yo, we had a job to do. Obviously, these liars weren't going to let us do it in a certain way, but they
and we ain't gonna bring in every single person. We're not gonna bring in Dave Meltzer and Dave Bixenspan and Wade Keller and Sean Ross Sapp and whoever else to completely, Mike Johnson to kick in the door on all of it.
Yeah, like I don't know if it was a case where the budget wasn't that big, but like they took certain concessions, like we'll give you the entire vault of the archive or whatever, so you can use any footage you want. So they took that, I would imagine, in exchange for, hey, we not gonna bust this all the way to fuck open.
Also, I'd like to note when I was watching it and they were showing WrestleMania 3, they were showing WrestleMania 1 matches stuff and WrestleMania 3. I also point out, like, that tweet that I put out by Dump Matsumoto about, like, hey, like, you ain't got to show the whole matches. You can just show little points because, like, that 80s wrestling, bro, that shit is not good. That shit is not captivating enough for you to put for a new. Imagine, bro. Imagine, you are a person that's never watched wrestling, or you are unfamiliar with some of the stuff that happened in the past, and they show you clips of this stuff. You're like, oh, that looks interesting. I want to watch Hulk Hogan body slam Andre the Giant, and then you go to Peacock and you fire up that WrestleMania 3. Oh my God, you'll be so disappointed.
It's gonna be the longest 12 minutes of your life.
You're gonna be so disappointed. Don't do it. Don't do it. But it's funny. I don't have people come to me telling me to kill myself because I say this shit don't hold up. Interesting how that works. Interesting.
Yeah. So let's move on.